I want to welcome Clinton Botway today with me. He is the owner of Botway Leasing, and he's located in New York City. Interesting kind of niche you're in, AI-powered real estate brokerage, and he helps landlords, developers, and families lower their lease costs. So welcome, Clinton. Good to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me, Dave. I appreciate you bringing me on and getting to talk about what I love most, which is real estate and technology.
Well, I'm glad the way you worded that. I think it's good to find out a little bit when I have people on is to learn a little bit about their background. I know this is not your first entrance into this space, so tell us a little bit about how you got into the space, a little bit about your background, and then share a little bit about what you're doing now that's sort of unique.
Sure, just to give everybody a little bit of context, I am from not a real estate family, but growing up, my parents were investing in real estate. Weekends were in the car, driving to different properties. I like to say that I rented my first property when I was 5 years old. So real estate is definitely in the blood. In college, I didn't study real estate, but I did buy 2 off-campus properties with my dad, and I rented them to some fraternity members. And then when I graduated, it was 2010. My grades were fine, but the job market was awful at the time from the great financial crisis. So I had a lot of time and no money, and I knew I wanted to be in real estate. I knew I wanted to be in New York City, so I became a real estate broker. And good clients, bad bosses and clients alike. So the idea for my company, we'll start there. Even a year ago or a year and a half ago when I first got the subscription, really come to think of it, it was probably 2 years ago. I don't want to say it couldn't do anything. It could have great conversations with people, definitely written by AI. And the progress that we've made from then until now is crazy, but make it a lot cheaper. So those are kind of the goals of what I'm trying to accomplish with my technology. I have a working MVP, which is a minimum viable product, and I have a few clients on a test pilot. So I'm actively renting apartments and responding to people, and it's pretty exciting. So the background before that is I was a real estate broker. I sold buildings, apartments, rented apartments. Most of my career has been focused on representing investors and landlords, all that comes with representing people like that. So being super responsive to them, providing good guidance, and the flip side of that is you're dealing with the general public, people that want to buy apartments and rent apartments. So number one, putting the property's best foot forward, responding to people as soon as possible, and then actively engaging and following up with them. So that's the start, we could say, of where we're at. And
well, it sounds like you've taken your real estate experience and obviously you optimized it with adding the AI component. And as AI has gotten better, it's kind of like, I like the phrase you use, you're cloning yourself. One of the things about growing any company, as you well know, is getting good people, optimum capacity. One of the things I like to ask, Clinton, is in every industry, there are kind of things, you're not really do. How would you describe that?
That's everybody should ask themselves. To piggyback off of that, there's a saying in Japanese called the ikigai. I forget how you spell it, but basically your purpose. Why do you wake up in the morning and get out of bed and do the hard things like try and convince people to spend too much money on real estate, like what I do. So why do I do it? Why do I love real estate? It's an amalgamation. It's a combination of something that's incredibly personal. This is where people live. Time is the most precious resource, in my opinion. Time is all we have, and you're kind of selling people time, right? When you rent an apartment or where you buy an apartment, that's where you live. So there's the personal, super philosophical, self-actualization, aspirational phase of real estate. But then there's the financial. So, that's cost, it's design, it's incredibly personal and incredibly important to people. And when I'm representing home sellers and landlords, it's a gigantic investment. You don't have to manage an S&P 500 index, but real estate, it's tactile, it's real, and there's plenty of other things I could say about real estate, but it's incredibly leverageable. Nobody is going to give you an 80% loan on your S&P 500 portfolio, or to go out and buy that. I mean, maybe somebody would, I guess, if you have enough money besides that. But it's an incredible tool, an incredible asset, and it's deeply personal, and it's super financial in that a lot of people, this is their nest egg. Important from all aspects of finance. And
Well, I would assume you probably really enjoy when a deal comes together where you have a happy client and a happy landlord, and you're matching up, and there's a lot of joy in helping people find what they want, and they're feeling fulfilled, which then obviously fulfills you as well. In every industry, there are some challenges. I mean, obviously, New York City it is a challenge in and of itself, just because things are fairly costly there. What do you see as some of the bigger challenges in your role?
It's a good question. Leaving New York City aside, if you're selling real estate there, everybody's playing in the same sandbox. I think that real estate brokerage in general, the trend for the last 6 months, we've seen Compass, which was the number one publicly traded real estate company, purchase the number two. Rocket, which is like Rocket Mortgage and Rocket Finance, purchased Redfin. I don't have the statistics of how many agents were associated with Redfin, but it's essentially a tech platform buying another brokerage. And then just last week, Real Brokerage, which is another publicly traded technology forward company, real estate brokerage, purchased or agreed to terms with Remax. So that's another 180,000 agents across the world. So we're seeing just again in the last few months 3 gigantic mergers of these real estate brokerages. And the question that I'm asking, or that I'm thinking about, and the reason that I started this company is we have AI at the backdrop of all of these competitors. And I could talk about the Microsoft report that came out last year, which said AI is probably going to replace people that are in sales in the United States. And then there's the other idea that McKinsey wrote a white paper on, and so did a venture capital firm called Menlo Ventures, which is the idea of software going from a tool to delivering an out. AI, basically, you can sell an outcome. You can sell an entire task, or it can accomplish an entire task from A to Z. My idea is that I think AI should help people, and it should provide a better service and be a lot less expensive.
Sure.
Yeah. all of these companies that are merging, and taking on hundreds of millions of dollars in debt and issuing stock, etc., all the financial games that publicly traded companies like to play. The question that I always ask is, what happens to the consumer when these CEOs have to justify their stock price, justify these mergers and this debt? Do you think that prices are going to go down for consumers under this new regime, or are they going to stay the same or even potentially go up? I think that monopolies are not known.
And maybe particularly tied to AI, because obviously you've taken, I'll say it, your traditional experience in real estate, and therefore you don't need to have the team, you don't need to have the overhead associated with that, and maybe along those lines. How do you see all that?
So build a product that people can use, and it's more of I'm thinking out loud with you together, but my one thought of how can one person disrupt this industry is make it free. So giving people the knowledge and to basically reference my knowledge base that I built, and helping people if they want. I'm not saying that this is going to be for everybody, but helping people do it themselves.
Those are things that are,
exactly.
like they're wash, rinse, and repeat once you get a good system down. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I have not solved the A to Z problem yet. I haven't solved the outcome where no human touches it, or maybe only the client touches it. And again, I think that my competitors, the Compasses, the Reals, the Redfins, they're working on something similar, but number one, I don't think they're ever going to charge lower fees for it. And number two, they're not going to turn on the lights one day and say, hey, these 500,000 people that work for us, we have AI to do this right now, so you guys can go home. I don't think that's going to happen either. I operate like what I think a real estate broker should operate on, which is whoever hires the broker pays the broker.
Okay.
That hasn't necessarily been the case in New York City for renters. Renters used to pay the fees. And similarly, the NAR settlement that happened about a year and a half ago in Missouri, basically the National Association of Realtors, as well as Compass and Anywhere and Real, they admitted to price fixing, which is that, and then you pay them for doing that work. But then sellers were also responsible for paying the buyer's agent. It was always negotiable in big quotes.
You really can represent, I'll say, the buyer or the seller.
Correct. I can't do both. Yeah. I can't do both. I think it's I don't want to say it's an ethical violation, but I will say to the point that the experience for that person, for the outside consumer, has to be great. Because if the experience is not good, then they're not going to want to rent or buy the apartment.
Well, and I mean, there's much to be said if you're a buyer, whether it's actually purchase or to lease or rent. Having someone represents you that knows the market, how to negotiate, all the kind of ins and outs of real estate, you can bring great benefit on that side as well. So I like all of that. As you think about your business life, I know that this is maybe a little bit more of a new endeavor for you, but when you create a company, there's things you learn along the way, things you didn't know when you first started out, you kind of learn as you go. At this point of your life, what would be something you would say, hey, this is something you want to pay attention to? Maybe I didn't pay attention to it, or maybe I'm glad I did, but what would be kind of a one key insight that you might pass along?
I think truth is simple, not to get philosophical again, but if it sounds right and you've heard 15 people say that, it's probably accurate. So, I expected to have my MVP, my minimum viable product, done and tested, 2 months ago, but here we are 2 months later, and we've rented apartments and opened doors and signed leases and stuff like that. So it's working now. It just takes always takes longer. It is more expensive. The number 2 recommendation that I'll give out is, if you are going to start a company, if you're going to endeavor to go off on your own or with a partner, choose something where you have an unfair advantage. Whether that's, this is your ikigai, this is your passion, but if you've really focused and become an expert in one particular field, that is super helpful. If you have no experience in a particular business, you may just end up not succeeding. So sometimes working for somebody else to learn the ropes, and this was my third piece of advice, is find a mentor, do something with an expert, spend time with them, 2 to 5 to 10 years, and again, become indisposable and an expert to their business. And then if you think you have a better idea for a business, or you want to go out on your own, I would say only at that time should you do it.
Sometimes when people ask me, particularly if they're more in the startup mode, I usually tell them, hey, look, find a space where people not only have a need. There are times when people have a need, but they don't know they have a need. So you have to then convince them they have a need, and then you have to convince them you have a need. So they're already looking for a solution, and you have the ability to meet that solution. Well, listen, Clinton, it's been good to chat with you a little bit today, and I wish you well in ramping up a little bit. But I think you're in a very unique space, and as you get it dialed in and you really begin to see the results, it seems like you have the potential to kind of just ramp it up and go from there. If people are interested in what you're doing, maybe they live in the New York City area, or they want to know more about what you're doing, what's a good way for them to connect with you?
Sure. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Clinton Botway, or go to botway.ai. One thing I will say for the people that aren't in New York or Connecticut or New Jersey or Pennsylvania where I do business, if you want to sell your home yourself, if you want access to the most tactically advantaged way to sell or rent your own property, or how to think about evaluating properties to purchase or rent, you can bring your own LLM. Right now, we plug in with Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini and a bunch of other ones, and you can basically use my brain to evaluate properties, and you can talk to, again, your own LLM like you'd be talking to me, and it's going to be a lot faster and smarter and know you immediately if you've given it enough context. So trying to help people outside that area as well, even if I can't physically represent them in a transaction. So always happy to connect and help people evaluate their own real estate situation. Just have fun with it.
Yeah, well, great. Listen, great to connect with you, and I hope people will reach out to you and perhaps connect with you there and, as you say, bar your brain and help them. So thanks for being with me today on The Edge of Success.
Thanks, David. Talk to you later.